I came across uh, an article that I thought was pretty relevant, and I wanted to read it. This was actually done by Charles Mudede, or Mudede. This was done in March 9th of 2015. But I'm going to read this because it's very relevant. It says, the French philosopher Jacques Rancière has written eloquently about the hatred of democracy. I don't like democracy either. America is not a democracy. America is a republic. It was founded as a republic. It should be a republic. A democracy is mob rule. Whoever gets the most vote gets to do something. So if a group of people decide that they want Seattle to be nothing but rich people living there, then that's how it's going to be under a democracy. But under a republic, you're guided by the Constitution of the United States of America and the laws within and the Bill of Rights within said Constitution. You're bound by those laws and you're restricted by the Constitution. Under a democracy, you're not restricted under nothing. Along with this kind of hatred is a hatred of the poor. But whereas an intensely passionate hatred of democracy is exclusive to the rich, no, it's not, because I hate democracy as well. And if you understood what democracy was, as opposed to a republic, then you would understand why I don't like democracy. But the government keeps pushing for it, pushing democracy. We're going to spread democracy. We're going to spread this. We're going to spread that. All they're doing is spreading a disease that'll kill freedom whenever it suits the government. And we won't have a thing we can do about it. Along with this kind of hatred is a hatred of the poor. But whereas an intensely passionate hatred of democracy is exclusive to the rich, who use every opportunity to undermine it, the hatred of the poor is shared by the rich and the middle classes. Indeed, for reasons that are obvious and not so obvious, the middle class may even hate the poor more than the rich do. A lot of times the rich have people that go out and do stuff for them. But the middle class, they do stuff for themselves. They go to the grocery store. They put gas in the tank. They go and buy a movie ticket. They go and buy an opera ticket. The rich, the extreme rich, I'm not talking about like the people that are Bill Gates. I'm talking about like the Bruce Waynes of the world. And you know who the Bruce Waynes of the world are. You know, Batman, Bruce Wayne. Yeah. Indeed, for reasons that are obvious, okay. Note, voter turnout is indeed much higher among the rich than it is among the poor, because the rich have the most to gain or lose in an election, whereas the poor feel like they'll be taken care of no matter who gets into office, so they don't feel the need to get out there and vote. They don't realize that their vote would actually stop a lot of the crap that's going on. Now, speaking of the vote, did you ever wonder why we've been taught since a little kid that the votes are sacred and that they're supposed to be secret? Let's just say that the government needs somebody to be put in office because they've been working on something that they want to get done. Like back when George W. Bush became president. Al Gore won that election fair and square. They weren't expecting Al Gore to win because of the Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton fiasco. So what did they do? They went in and they fixed the elections and gave it to George W. Bush. Why? Because they knew that if he got elected, people that voted for Al Gore would assume that more people just voted for Bush. when actually it was Al Gore that won the vote. See, I don't think elections should be private. I think people should be allowed to talk about who they want to talk about. Now, there's a downside to that too, because back in like Al Capone's day, people would go into the voting polls and the voting booths, and they would force you to vote the way they wanted. Now the government doesn't force you to vote the way they want. If the person they want in office doesn't get elected, they just go in and fix the election and fuck you out of the person you voted for. But it says here, not only do the rich vote more than the poor, but voting rights are mostly empty in three key democratic institutions: public transportation, public education, and public health. Those are the people that vote less. People that take public transportation, now I'm not saying all vote less, but those that vote less are usually people that are taking public transportation, they go to public schools, and they use public health care. They get health care for free. Because those are weak. Not the people per se, but public transportation, public education, and public health are kept weak. They keep people relying on the government for help. They want to help you just enough to keep you in the situation you're in. And they want you to be comfortable with your situation just because they think that if you need them, you'll constantly keep needing them, and they don't want you to get out of your situation. Why do you think there's so many people on welfare? Because you can lay around the house and do whatever you want. Now, that's not all people on welfare. Some people on welfare, they use that just until they can get their job off the ground and go back to work and stuff. There's some people like that, but the majority of the people on welfare get stuck because the government makes it easy for them to get that $200 and some a month or whatever. Keep pregnant, I like sex. I do. I like to get down. I like to enjoy myself with a woman. I like to have fun. But I also like to make sure that I don't get caught up in what I'm doing and forget about where I'm at, because I don't want another child. I've got a kid. He's 31 years old, and that's it. I'm done. Unless it's God's will that I have another one. But I don't see that happening because I'm 51, going on 52, June 18th of this month. It says here, but this is to be expected though. All of those things being weak. This is to be expected because in our society, it is easy for the middle class to hate the poor. And it is. Pepsi, red, white, and blue. Coca-Cola, can't commit. Red, white, and blue, American made. It is easy for the middle class to hate the poor, to hate their lack of money. Stalling a line in a store so they can count pennies for a pack of cigarettes, or a can of soda, or a loaf of bread, or food items for that matter. Not all poor have to count pennies, but there's an awful lot that have to count their change. Why? Because we're poor. There's seemingly endless run-ins with the law. Yeah, a lot of poor seem to have run-ins with the law because they are poor, and that's how they are. So that's how they act. They act poor. They can't afford to act rich, so they have run-ins with the law because the law knows that a lot of the poor people get into trouble a lot. Indeed, the hatred of public transportation is intimately tied with hatred of the poor, unless they use the light rail to get themselves to a baseball game or a football game or a basketball game. Then they'll take then they love public transportation. Now, if you got middle class that are making good money and they work downtown, park your car to park and ride and take public transportation, unless you have, unless your job has underground parking and you get it for free. Take public transportation. It's not bad for you. It's cheaper than parking for a month. Indeed, the hatred of public transportation is immediately tied with the hatred of the poor. Middle class types who are unfortunate enough to use the bus expose themselves to the talk, the begging, the bad health of the poor, but instead of blaming the society, they blame the form of transportation. The unpleasant practices connected with poverty thus reinforce a generalized sign system that identifies these practices. A generalized system that identifies these practices not with social conditions but with individuals. See, they want to pick out the individual instead of the possibility that the middle class and the rich have caused the poor. Did y'all think of that? Because of your spending habits and because of your rental habits and because of your lording your money over everybody, it's very possible that you could have caused the poor. The system that identifies these practices not with social conditions but with individuals. Poverty is identified as a life choice. People say, oh, you wanted to become poor. Who in their right mind, other than somebody that's been rich, that gets religion and gives it all away, wants to be poor? I don't like living on $755 a month. If you were used to making $100 grand a year, could you handle automatically losing your job and getting on SSI due to a disability and living on $755 a month? I'm sure you went clothes shopping or you bought a pair of Louis Vuitton stiletto heels that cost $1,000 if you're a woman and you ain't got a rich sugar daddy taking care of you. You got to pay for that yourself. They say it's a life choice. Would you choose to be poor? The use of food stamps, a character flaw. You notice chicken bones under a bus seat. The hatred grows. Hating the rich takes much greater emotional and intelligent. And hating the rich takes much more. I'm having a hard time reading this. You got to understand, I'm a little dyslexic sometimes. I get ahead of myself very fast. Hating the rich takes much greater emotional and intellectual effort than it does to hate the poor if you're middle class. It is a hate that goes against the flow of influence. Now, if you're middle class and you're doing pretty good and you're making, say, you're in the lower middle class, then you probably might associate a little bit more with the poor. But if you're in the upper crust of the middle class, you're going to associate more with the rich. Why? Because you're making enough money to not care. Because you'll shop at places where the rich will shop at, where poor can't go. Like, how many grocery stores in the city of Seattle that cater to the rich, that have things like Fraser Crane? You know the show. You know that shop that Fraser and Niles likes to shop at, Niles, and his dad was with him. He was talking about the cost of dog food being so expensive. When Daphne came in and was talking about how expensive the biscuits were, and Niles was used to shopping for that. Prosciutto, he got that for like, what was it? I think he paid like, he got like a pound of prosciutto, and it was like $20 for a pound of prosciutto. But he was used to that, so that's what he paid for. You don't see the poor going in there. They can't afford it. The rich, after all, frequently celebrate the rich. The rich are, after all, frequently celebrated on the covers of magazines and other media platforms. And while we must associate with the bad habits of the poor, those chicken bones, for example, well, for me, It's sunflower seeds. They get in the back, they eat sunflower seeds, they spit the shells on the floor, and whenever you tell them about it, they curse you out and call you a motherfucker. You know the kind. That's the exception. A lot of the poor don't act like that. I know some people that are poor, and if you didn't know they were poor, you couldn't tell. They're that cultured. That bad habits, and from what we must associate with bad habits of the poor is this relentless praise of the rich and a relentless dissemination of their values, which privilege private space far above shared space. The poor in our society are even alienated from their own values, which, to serve their interest, has to be communal. The result? Those in the middle class tend to hate the poor immediately and hate the rich when it's too late. A sudden loss of basic benefits, a home being foreclosed, a factory closing, or a market crashing. Yeah. Now, you say that that's what you want for your city. But what are you going to do about McDonald's? The rich don't eat at McDonald's unless it's like really trendy. And you're like Jay Leno, who has a platinum black card, and he's able to go into a McDonald's and he can get things for free. Then he'll go there. But why do we hate the poor so much? Why is Seattle so down on the poor? Why does Seattle want to move the poor out of the city? Why can't everybody enjoy how beautiful Seattle is? Why? Why can't we? Why do we have to be the only ones that can't enjoy the beauty that is Seattle? And a lot of the rich and a lot of the people that move to Seattle to become rich, you guys could give a flying fuck less about Seattle. You don't give a crap about Seattle. All you care about is making Seattle into what you want it to be. You're wanting that money. You want that exclusive job. Seattle is way too good for that. Seattle should not be turned out onto a street corner under a bright light. And Seattle shouldn't have to say, "Come here, sailor, I'll cut you a deal." Seattle is not made for that.